Welcome to part 2 of the Emotions mini-series. If you haven't checked out part 1, then click on it over here. It's on how to process emotions, and it's the introduction to this mini course. There's going to be 7 videos in this mini-series, so make sure to like and subscribe to be notified as they come out. So in this video, I'm hoping to open your eyes to a whole new relationship with the emotion of anger. So stay tuned. Anger is one of our most primal emotions. It is our survival strategy. And even though we've been conditioned to be civilized, we still feel this very animal emotion in our bodies. We've just learned to work with it in different ways. So think of this for a moment. A mother bear with her cub. When she feels threatened, she immediately puffs out her chest, she stands up, she growls, she exudes an aggressive energy in order to make the threat move on. She is ready to fight. But through our own conditioning, when we feel threatened, we don't allow that natural mechanism to kick in. So let's get curious for a moment about what your experience growing up was with this emotion. If you grew up in quite a volatile household where there was a lot of screaming, shouting, maybe even violence, your nervous system would be shaped to respond to anger in a variety of ways. Your nervous system would become so hyperactive, so reactive, that you would also meet even perhaps small situations with frustration, anger, and even rage. The flip side of that is that all of that volatility got your nervous system so overwhelmed that you're stuck in freeze mode. Even though perhaps you'd want to say no or you'd want to interact in the situation, you either shut down or freeze. Another example of potentially how we were conditioned to be with our anger is as small children, maybe we were being quite playful or exerting some aggression, and our parents told us that it was mean or rude to express that emotion. Anger is your bodyguard emotion. It is there to protect you, to make you feel powerful. Think of the phoenix analogy for a moment. The phoenix explodes into fire, and then from its ashes it's reborn. When we start to work with our anger in healthy ways, we're more like the phoenix, as opposed to being like a destructive burning wildfire that causes absolute chaos and devastation around us when it's left unchecked. Anger is our life force, so if we are suppressing our anger, we're also suppressing this innate life force energy. This can cause a variety of not only mental and emotional symptoms, but physical symptoms as well. Anger left locked in the body can cause things varying from fatigue all the way through to cancers. So it's really important to work with this emotion in new and conscious ways, which I'm going to be sharing with you in a moment. Anger is there to help us feel powerful when we're feeling powerless, when we're feeling small. It comes up and out to make us feel like we're allowed to take up space. But because we've been conditioned to not do that, we end up shrinking in and silently imploding from the inside. This wonderful emotion also helps to uphold our boundaries. With this emotion by our side, we can feel so powerful and safe moving through the world. When we work with our anger, we're able to tap into that powerful 2-letter word of no and use it in a way that feels good and empowering for not just ourselves, but for those around us. If we're saying yes when we mean no, we're not actually creating honest relationships with those around us. The clearer we are on our own boundaries, the easier it is for other people to know where they stand with us. When this emotion is pushed down too long, it can come up as frustration, irritation, annoyance, just feeling generally agitated. This is an indication that we've kind of stockpiled a whole bunch of anger beneath the surface, and like any emotion, that energy has to come out somewhere. So what's beneath our anger? Most of the time, anger is actually only the very tip of the iceberg. And beneath it, when we start to get curious, there's hurt, pain, sorrow, upset, disappointment. There's so many other things going on. But perhaps we're just reacting from that tiny tip and not really getting to process and digest everything that's sitting underneath that anger. So as we start to work with anger, not only are we having a healthier relationship with anger itself, but we're also being able to work with actual needs and pain points of the other emotions sitting beneath the surface. So let's explore 3 types of anger. Again, there's a wide spectrum of emotion, but for the sake of time, let's explore these 3 types. And I invite you to get really curious as to which one of these perhaps you're leaning towards. Again, you can't change it if you don't own it. So as we go through the next few, I want you to really just feel in to which one resonates with you. The first type is passive aggressive. This may sound familiar to some of you. When someone asks us, "What's wrong? Are you okay?" and our response is, "Yes, everything's fine." Our words don't actually match our body language and tone. So the body is presenting as disgruntled, annoyed, irritated, but the words that are coming out of our mouth is "everything is fine." So this would be because we don't feel comfortable or safe to express what it is that's truly going on for us. Or perhaps we have a negative association to confrontation. We fear conflict, therefore we feel that we need to avoid it. This could be one of the reasons why we're being passive aggressive. So if this is you, that's okay. This is a learned strategy, and the clearer you get on some of those limiting beliefs and reframing your relationship to the idea of confrontation, you'll start to feel safer and safer in being able to express this emotion. The second type is explosive aggression. This is where we are easily triggered and reactive. This could look like shouting, screaming, maybe even physically getting violent. It's almost like we cannot contain the emotion and it just explodes out of us. This type of anger is extremely destructive, and even though it's a really clever strategy to move that explosive energy out of the body, it causes a lot of destruction and harm that ends up actually making us just feel guilty afterwards. Usually with this type of anger, that was part of our conditioning. It's what we modeled from either a caregiver or parent, or it's because we've suppressed our anger so much that it's the only way that we've learned to move this energy out of the body. We could actually potentially even start fights because we feel like this is the only way to move anger out of the body, but it isn't. So let me give you a personal example of this. I grew up in quite a volatile home environment, so my nervous system was easily triggered by any tension in the air. When I met my husband, who has a really healthy way of working with his anger, anytime his voice would elevate or his posture would become bigger, I would immediately react as if he was being aggressive, either try and make it stop, or I myself would become quite aggressive. When I understood where this was coming from, I was able to see that his anger was not actually aggressive, that it was just him expressing whatever had upset him. And the safer I became with that, the easier it was for me to drop my defense mechanism. The third type is assertive anger. This is really where we're able to stay in that powerful state of being, express ourselves clearly and firmly. In this type, we actually have our needs met because we're listened to, and we're not just listening, we're actually seeking to understand what it is. Therefore, we're being able to move through conflict much more gracefully. So let's look at some tools for working with our anger. In my program Wayfinder, Navigating the Inner World of Feeling, I go into a lot more detail and a lot more exercises, but I really just wanted to share some of these with you today so that you could start to build and change this relationship with anger. So one of the fundamental starting blocks with working with this emotion differently is understanding that it is natural and normal to feel anger, that it is okay that this emotion is there, that it's present, and starting to remove any of those unbeneficial, limiting beliefs that we have around it. We also want to be able to stretch our capacity to be able to hold and be with this emotion in more nourishing and constructive ways. A really powerful way to do this is to start to get curious, dropping all the judgment and really leading with curiosity. When anger is present for you, how big is it? How small is it? Is it hot? Is it cold? Is it still? Is it moving? How does anger present itself for you? Also, staying present with the emotion allows it to move more freely and doesn't become as stuck as when we're trying to just keep it up in the mind. You cannot intellectually process emotions. You have to feel the emotion and find a pathway to move the energy up and out of the body. If we ignore this emotion, it will keep on knocking. And this could be presented as either chronic irritation or just a sort of general grumpy mood. So it's really important to dig beneath that iceberg and understand what is wanting to be seen, heard, and felt. Another powerful tool to working with your anger is getting clear on your boundaries. A boundary is what keeps us safe. We're allowed to take up space, and a boundary is there to be able to hold that, to protect ourselves and what is important to us. What do we value in life? When we get clear on what our boundaries actually are, we're able to communicate this to the people in our lives more easily so they can feel safer with where they stand with us. Holding the clarity of our boundaries allows us to feel powerful, safe, and assertive in the way that we move through either our professional world or our personal life. Also, when working with boundaries, it's really important to get clarity on whether this is a defense mechanism versus an actual boundary. And we go into more details in my program about this. But essentially, a defense mechanism is a reaction to a situation, whereas a boundary is almost like that alarm system that's saying, hey, I don't like what you're doing. We really want to understand the difference between these two so that we're more consciously working with this emotion. If we're living in a constant state of defense, not only is this really taxing to the overall vitality of the body, but it can also feel really isolating and lonely because we're keeping everybody at arm's length. We're not really allowing people into our beautiful sacred garden, even all those wonderful emotions like love, joy, trust, and connection. It's also really important for us to understand, is this an actual boundary or is it coming from a wound? A defense mechanism is more likely to come from a wound. Like in the example I gave you earlier, my defense mechanism, when met with anger, was because of the experiences I'd had growing up. And the more I was able to understand that and be compassionate to that aspect of myself, the more able I was to be able to work with this emotion in a more productive way. A really important tool is to recognize that you are not your anger. So often when we are feeling angry, we communicate it as I am angry, right? We've created an identification with the emotion. This in itself locks the energy in place because now I've identified with it. I am angry. I am grumpy. No, I feel angry. I feel grumpy. It's moving. It's energy in motion. And the more you allow it to be that, the easier it can move out and through your body. Just to recognizing that we are feeling the emotion, it's coming up and out, and it's there for a reason. It's there to protect us, to hold us. We don't need to embody that grumpy, bitter, angry person. Learning to identify our triggers is a really, really important aspect of working with this emotion. Our triggers are our teachers. They hold the golden key to either unresolved trauma or setting clearer and more potent boundaries. So let's look at some factors that could contribute to these triggers. The first one is internal factors. So these could include things like personal insecurity that we're reacting to, or it could be unresolved trauma or even unresolved conflicts from the past. So being activated by something that's coming on or going on internally for us. Again, the more curious we become of what these internal triggers could be, the easier it is for us to be able to work with them. The second is an external factor. This could be an actual physical threat or a conflict with a person, and we're being triggered by a situation feeling really unfair or really unkind to us. And again, if it's an external factor, we really want to be able to meet it with that assertive energy. The third could be a biological factor. But because the mind and the body are not independent of one another, they're an ecosystem, and the nervous system has been wired into that, stuck in that fight or flight mode. This could be creating chronic stress, which creates inflammation, which could throw out a whole whack of things, our hormones and our cortisol levels. High cortisol levels could show up as that little ring around the tummy, extra padding. Again, it's there not to make you feel insecure, but it's actually a way of protecting the body. But it can also make us very easily reactive and throw out a whole bunch of other hormones. So really important to check those biological factors as well. Making sure that we're getting enough sleep, that we're eating correctly will also help to work with this emotion. So it's really important that when we start to unpack those internal factors, that we do this in a really safe way. We can do this either in therapy, with a coach, with a family member or friend that we trust, but it's really important to start to unpack those things in a way that are not re-traumatizing the body. Remember, your brain doesn't know the difference between past and future. So when we relive an experience, it's really important to be able to clear the charge on that without actually re-traumatizing the body. One of the tools that I use in my practice that I find to be really beneficial is called timeline therapy. This allows us to go back to a particular event, but looking at it from above as opposed to reliving the experience. What we do as we gain insights and learnings about this event, we clear the negative charge that was held there. And I've seen this really shift people's relationships to anger when we clear it at the very root. So if you're wanting to learn more powerful ways to work with this incredible emotion, then like and subscribe for future videos. This is part 2 of the emotion series, and next up we're going to be learning about how to work with sadness. If you feel very curious and ready to delve deeper into your emotional world, then definitely check out the Wayfinder course, where you'll be equipped with really powerful tools to be able to work with a wide variety of your emotions. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.